All right. Good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. We are pleased to welcome Jason Jaggi, Director of Community Development for the City of Creve Coeur. Jason Jaggi brings extensive experience in planning and community development. Having served in various roles across the St. Louis region, he began his career as planner with the City of Kirkwood in 1999, followed by roles in St. Louis County government and the City of Clayton, where he advanced to senior planner and oversaw zoning, long-range planning, development, review, GIS, and census coordination. From 2012 to 2015, he served as a planning manager for the City of St. Charles. Since 2015, Jason has been the Director of Community Development for the City of Creve Coeur. He holds a Bachelor of Science from Missouri State University and a Master's in Regional and Community Planning from Kansas State University. He also is a certified member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. As neighboring communities, Olivet residents, as well as our city council and staff, are always interested in learning about what's happening next door. Joining us in the audience today is our own Director of Planning and Community Development, Mr. Carlos Trejo. It's always encouraging to see the ongoing communication and collaboration between bordering municipalities. Staying connected and informed helps us all serve our residents, especially when projects or developments in one city may have an impact on others. Jason, we're glad to have you here today, and we're looking forward to hearing what's going on in the city of Creve Coeur. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mayor.
First, what are the current top priorities for the community development in Creve Coeur?
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for having me here this morning. Appreciate being here. Top priorities, we have a few major projects or initiatives underway in Creve Coeur. First is that you've seen, probably all of you have seen the big construction site on Olive Olea Village. The former Bear West campus is undergoing redevelopment on that 96-acre site. It will be a mixed-use development with several different components or phases to it, including a Main Street component with commercial and retail on the first floor and apartments above. That will be, I would say that's probably the centerpiece of the development. We'll also have a little pocket park in that area, like a plaza, so they can have events, and there'll be a little bit of green space there. And then there'll be a grocery store component with what we call a junior anchor as well on that side, more toward the east side of the site. And then one notable aspect of that project is there'll be very little surface parking. So most of the parking you're going to see there, like along the Main Street area, would be on the street or within parking structures. So that obviously all of these types of developments like this drive up a lot of cost and expense to do a development like this. It's not like a typical shopping center where you just do the surface parking and you erect, basic buildings. This has a lot going on with it. So the city did provide some assistance in terms of public financing in order to facilitate this development. So that is a major project that we have. They've done a lot of site work, as you've noticed today, a lot of infrastructure. So when Bayer, before that, Monsanto owned that campus, the utilities were brought over from the east side of Lindbergh on that campus over. So all the utilities fed from the east campus to the west. That all had to be disconnected, and then new utilities brought into the site, as well as a lot of stormwater infrastructure. Lots of detention areas. They're going to have some wet detention, which means it'll be like a pond. So all that work right now, that's what you see going on today. So, and then the other aspect over there is that Bayer announced last fall that they're selling and offering, putting their portions of their existing site up for sale as well. So they have about 155 acres on the east side of Lindbergh. They're selling about 92 acres of that campus and entertaining proposals from developers. So that's created a lot of change, as you can imagine, in Creve Coeur and adjacent right here next to all of that. So we have kind of been talking with them about what they're looking for, what their goals are. And they're working with some finalists is what they've told us in terms of, like selecting a preferred developer and purchaser for that site. We are kind of taking a few steps back from that and are undergoing a planning process because we don't have any long-range plans in place for that site because we didn't expect them to sell, a large part of their campus, nor did we expect Ole Village to come around either. And when they offered that site for sale, that, we didn't have much advance notice of that either.
Okay.
So we've had to do a lot of planning work very quickly to kind of prepare for redevelopment. And so that's what we're doing now. We have consultants, PGAV planners. They're assisting us with updating a comprehensive plan for the Bear site, the Bear East site. And we actually have an open house, which I've sent to Carlos. And the public is more than welcome to attend that. And if you have any interest in the Bear East site and what happens there, we will have an open house this Monday at 6 o'clock at our government center on Ballas, on 300 North New Ballas. So 6 to 8 o'clock. Feel free to stop by if you have any interest in what's going on planning wise for that site. And then just to wrap that question up, Mayor, 39 North, we're always interested in furthering 39 North, and Olivet has been a big part of that as well. On the Creve Coeur side, we have some buildings that are vacant, and so we're very interested in seeing if we can get those, new tenants in there or redevelopment, reusing of those buildings. Also the infrastructure in the area with the 39 North Greenway, Centennial Greenway coming through. All of those activities are keeping us busy over there. And then we have an Olive Grazier site, if you're familiar with that. That is a vacant site. There was a proposal for a quick trip there a few years ago that had a lot of litigation. Ultimately, the court sided with the city in denial of a conditional use permit for that gas station. And it's been vacant ever since. The good news is we have a developer who has that under contract and is going to be proposing a mixed use building with commercial and apartments above. So not unlike Olivet, you're seeing a lot of demand for apartments. We are too. We've got some questions about, how many of these apartments can we accept, and, all of that. I think those are going to be some more questions that probably come up, because we have several hundred units planned for Olea. This is bringing more units in. But in concept, it seems like a pretty good proposal, but we'll go through the process and see what happens. So those are, I would say, in development, those are our top priorities right now.
I know one of the challenges here in Olivet is to maintain the character of the city while addressing the needs of new houses and whatnot. Do you find that to be a challenge with the new homes that are coming up in your community?
Yeah, the interesting thing, and I feel like it's unique with Creve Coeur and surprises a lot of folks, is we do not have an architecture review process for new homes. So in single family residential, we don't have an architecture review board. We don't look at any design aspects of new homes whatsoever. So if you're having an addition onto your home, we don't look at aesthetic or design considerations. We just check for zoning and obviously residential building code requirements. We do work closely with our trustees and subdivisions to make sure that they've had a chance to review the plans. But we don't really look at design. The only way that we look at design, we certainly do for multifamily housing, which is more of a commercial type development. But we also have a process called an RDD, which is a residential design district, which is a unique procedure where you can cluster housing and offer more density in exchange for open space. Kind of get involved with a little bit of design on homes, but to a very simple level. But we do regulate sites with respect to stormwater. We have a very strict stormwater ordinance. I think it's probably similar to Olivet's, where if you're tearing down a home and rebuilding, or even proposing a large addition or a detached structure, you have to submit a stormwater plan from an engineer that shows no adverse impacts where you're not going to create additional runoff. So
okay,
that's how we regulate. But my understanding is Olivet, you have probably a more extensive review process for single family homes.
what particular?
Yeah. And it's something that has come up over the years in Creve Coeur. Should we have a design review committee? Should we have an architecture review? And it's never quite gotten the traction to take it further in terms of, establishing some sort of design review component. So
Right.
probably one of the few cities in this area that doesn't have that.
What are some of the major employers? Who are your biggest industries in Creve Coeur?
First thing comes to mind is medical. So we have a lot of medical industries in Creve Coeur. We have two hospitals. Obviously, the major hospital in the St. Louis County area is Mercy Hospital. They've expanded south of Conway with their new performance medicine building. And now you can see they're doing work even further south towards Highway 40. That's actually Town and Country. That's not in Creve Coeur. The line is right there. It's right behind the new building, actually, and then you go south of that Highway 40, that's Town and Country. But they're always keeping our permitting department busy. They're always doing work, as you can imagine, of the big hospital campus. And then we have Barnes Jewish, West County.
Yes.
So they have a newer hospital. And then we have all the different medical specialties and practices. I feel like we have every single medical specialty you could think of along Ballas and then further towards Mason and everywhere in between. We also have a lot of banking. We have lots of banking branch facilities in Creve Coeur. And then our 39 North Ag Tech District with the Danforth Science Center just right across the street. That's a major employment hub in 39 North, and I know all of that. Creve Coeur, along with the economic partnership, that's a major employment center and wanting to grow that and develop that. So I would say those are probably our largest issue or employers.
Okay. I understand you guys publish a business letter.
Mhm.
Can you, and it supports local businesses and whatnot. Tell me a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah, so it's an electronic newsletter. It's distributed monthly by email. We don't have a print version. We have a residential newsletter that is printed and mailed to all residents in the city. This one is just electronic, and businesses, when they come in for a business license, we ask them to have an opportunity when they fill out the form if they'd like to receive that. So it's an opt-in sort of thing. And then it's emailed monthly, and our public information officer, Melissa, produces the content for that, and with a focus on business interests and chamber type things as well. And, we do have development updates in there periodically. But we've been doing that for several years, and just as something to try to help and highlight the business community in Creve Coeur. Yeah.
So is it kind of similar to the Small Business Monthly?
I'm not familiar with that, but I think what it tries to do is highlight city initiatives and activities, things that would be of interest to the business community. It doesn't, though, it does not highlight specific businesses.
Okay.
Which is something that has been talked about over the years. But I think it's more of a fairness. How do you make it available to all businesses? And, we'd like to highlight a restaurant, but then, is that fair to everyone? So that's something I think we have struggled with. But a lot of communities, the business letters that I've seen, they'll have like a business spotlight or something like that. So it can be done, but that's not something that we have.
And it's strictly just Creve Coeur businesses?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, good. That's a good way to support
Yeah.
your local business, which I think is a good thing.
Mhm.
Are there any strategies that the city is exploring to provide a range of housing options for residents? Because affordable housing and whatnot, and that's a big thing. Because we have a lot of people who are working hard, and affordable housing is something that seems to escape a lot of people, especially lately.
It does, and I would say it's escaping Creve Coeur
Yeah.
quite a bit, actually. We are very interested. Our comprehensive plan speaks to this. Our strategic plan that we just updated also speaks to this in terms of housing diversity, meaning different housing types. So we hear pretty regularly from our residents, they live in the single family homes with larger yards. When you get older, that becomes less attractive, and they would like to stay in the area, but they'd like more a villa, townhome, some other type of housing option. There aren't a lot of those available in the area. The ones that we have had developed seem to do very well. They sell and get built pretty quickly. So that's something that we're interested in. The question becomes, well, where can these go? And that becomes a little bit of the rub, because they're more dense. And when you have a single family property, your expectation is you want more of that. You don't want the developments. So density, I think, as Carlos can say, can be a planner or can be a planning term, but it can be a scary thing. But density, if done well, can actually be very attractive and very compatible. So those are things that we're interested in. It's actually on our strategic plan to try to look at where could we accommodate that. In terms of affordability, we actually had our consultants look at that question. Prepare a report on it when we were looking at Ola Village. And it was presented and it didn't receive a whole lot of traction.
Okay.
So that tells me that doesn't excuse the need. It's just the fact that there's a lot of education in terms of what is affordable housing. Because I don't think there's a lot of understanding that affordable housing can mean, it doesn't necessarily mean, low income housing. There's also the missing middle portion of housing. There's all stages of the housing affordability question. And right now, we don't offer a whole lot of affordable housing.
Right.
But I think that's something that we need to look at. So I think it's on our list, but when it has been introduced, it's been, well, we don't see the issue.
Right.
But when I explain it to folks, well, your kids grew up in Creve Coeur. They go off to college, they get a degree. How can they afford to live in Creve Coeur? I mean, I think that's the question, and they are, that is kind of, then I think it starts to resonate a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
I think you're
and
right.
how is Olivet looking at that?
Well, we look at that, we have programs that we put together right now. We're working on a new development down Dillman. Right before you get to the crossing, we're looking to redevelop that through the housing authority.
Okay,
And so that's a new program that we're putting together. It's still in process, but it's going to more than triple the amount of affordable housing that we have in the city of Olivet. I think what you said is very important. I think with people, when they hear affordable housing, they have to change how they think of who's living there. You have very hardworking people with college degrees, with full-time jobs, and these are good, hardworking people. And they come from all backgrounds, and they want to live a good life in a good neighborhood.
and good schools.
And good schools.
Right.
And it's very elusive for a lot of people who just graduated from college
Mhm.
and they can't get in. And I think the world needs to look at that differently. And I think that is part of a good community that has a diverse community, not just racially, but also income wise. That's what makes a great community, to have a good tapestry of different backgrounds. It's what makes us a good city. And I'm sure it will do the same for you. As far as collaboration between cities,
Mhm.
I figure that's important. How does Creve Coeur work with neighboring cities like Olivet when it comes to a regional planning, transportation projects, and the sharing with the challenges across the communities? How can we partner with you to make both of our communities better?
Well, Mayor, I think there's probably more opportunities to partner, but I would say, with some of the things that we've done is I think both cities participate with our chambers of commerce, the Creve Coeur Olivet Chamber of Commerce. And I think that's a good venue for collaboration with our business community. I would also use an example, when we're updating the Bear East site for our planning process, reaching out to our neighboring cities. So we had our consultant reach out to Carlos, and then also the city of Ladue that border the area, letting them know, hey, this is what's going on. Here's, an open house, and feel free to spread this word to your residents. So I think good neighbor things like that is what we strive to do. When we notice, and if we got a zoning application and it goes into Olivet or the county, we're treated the same. There's no, it's not like they don't get a notice or things like that. I do think, and I think with 39 North, I think has been, since I've been in Creve Coeur, has been a really good model for partnerships. And Olivet and Creve Coeur have both partnered in that, and Olivet in particular being, within the area, there's direct adjacencies to all this. We're right here together.
Right.
So I think that's been a good model. There's probably more things that we can do. I mean, I don't have all the knowledge, but I know our police departments, probably work together and things like that. But I think it's come up several years ago, inspections and permitting, are there ways that we could collaborate on some of those things? So there's certainly more opportunities for that, but.
Yeah.
But, we are all part of a larger community. We have our smaller cities in this area, but things that happen in the city of St. Louis impact all of us. Things that happen in other parts of the county impact us, St. Charles County and so forth. So I think from a regional perspective, it is important that we keep that in mind, that we're smaller pieces of a much bigger metro areas.
Okay, this is my final question for
Yeah.
you. What advice would you give someone entering the field of community development and planning? You seem to have done quite well for yourself.
Well, I've been fortunate to have several opportunities in planning. And I came back to the St. Louis area after graduate school. I was actually going to move to Chicago, but then received that offer from Kirkwood, so I did come back here. And there's a lot of planning opportunities in St. Louis. I think it's a great place to be to work as a planner. My advice would be, determine what interests you in planning. So it's a very broad field. There's a lot of planners that focus on transportation, environmental. Carlos and us, we're more like we're the typical planner that work for a city government, more of a traditional planner. But there's other options than that. And so I would say just explore, kind of see what you end up liking. And it's okay to move around a little bit, especially when you're a young planner starting out, to find out what you like, what areas do you like to work in and things like that. I like working with smaller cities. I found that out working in St. Charles. I like St. Charles, but it was a really big city. And I felt more comfortable in a smaller city. And so that, for me, that was a little bit better of a fit. I just felt I liked the more closeness of things. And with that too, if you're really interested in planning too, I suggest getting a degree in planning, and then becoming certified as a planner as you advance your career. So
I agree with you on the small town feel. I've lived in Olivet all my life, and when I talk to people, they say what they like about Olivet is that they love their neighbors.
Mhm.
And they love their community. I always liken it to being in a modern day Mayberry. It's a great place to be. And with Carlos is part of the reason why we're a well-oiled machine. Cause he's available and he makes sure that when people ask questions, he gets an answer to them, usually within 24 hours or maybe within the hour.
Right.
But we need people like him to make sure that we're running a well-oiled machine. I'll ask, is anyone in the audience might have a question for our guest? If not, I'll let them go home, take a donut home.
Over on the Fair West, what's the use of the old office building? Is that going to be offices, or is that sort of the reuse that you're talking about?
Yeah, so Bear is retaining, and it's still their crop science division is still going to be headquartered there. So they're retaining the office buildings. So if you can imagine that site, basically it's sort of like a J is what they're selling. So the research and development components, the R&D buildings, those will be for sale as well. The greenhouses and that open space, that wooded area, that's all up for sale. So a lot of the stuff along Warson is what's being sold.
On the west side though.
Okay, oh, I'm sorry, on the west side, Ole Village? Okay, my apologies. So they are repurposing those buildings. One of them will be they want to put apartments in there. So they would actually be converting an office building to residential. That is their plan.
That should be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a really, very innovative project. It checked a lot of the boxes that we had in terms of planning goals. And that's just one aspect where they're looking to convert that building to residential.
I know when they started on the development, I never saw a deer in my life in my front yard. That's my first time seeing a deer in my front yard.
I would say if there's one big, part that's, unfortunate or, compromises have to be made, is a lot of the clearing on that site, had to be done, and a lot of heavy grading.
Yeah.
That's sort of a byproduct of the project. We worked hard with them to retain trees and things like that. They ended up having to come back and get approval to take down more because, once they got further into the design for retaining walls, they had to, structurally construct the wall that, more trees came out. I think because of that project, we're going to be looking extra careful at the Bear East site when it comes to some of those wooded areas. But I also want to be honest with folks that I think we're not gonna be able to keep all those trees. When there's redevelopment, trees are gonna come down, but how they, to what extent are the tree removals? Can we get development that, can preserve more of them and integrate a little bit more? I think those are the things that we're trying to look at for that other site, because your point is, I think a lot of those deer probably, they've moved on to other areas, because
Right.
there is a lot of wildlife in this area. There's coyotes, I've seen turkey out there,
Yes.
lots of turkey, I mean, deer, of course, everywhere. And that they're gonna probably be relocated from some of that, so, yeah.
Oh,
So I have actually then a two-part question. So then one is, if a developer then has to remove all those trees, is there any way then in the city of Creve Coeur to have that as part of the redevelopment, that then they would, where possible, put new trees in there for future growth, so that it's not all, just hard surfaces? And then the other question was about the apartments that they're redeveloping, when you were saying that when you were presenting the affordability option in Olia, people weren't so in favor of that. Is that something that could be incorporated into the redevelopment of those labs into apartments?
Yeah, I think those are all good questions. First one is, they are required to put back trees. So we do have in the development requirements for Olia that any trees 6 caliper inches or greater, they have to replace on a 1-to-1 basis. So we do have that, and a lot of the trade-off, if you will, with them having to remove more trees to get those walls in, they had to put more back in.
Yeah.
So we have a plan, and it will be planted very heavily and dense. And we have the ability to make sure that happens, but still, it doesn't replace.
Yeah.
It doesn't replace old growth trees. With that being said, there were, a lot of those woods though weren't exactly maintained very well, and there's actually a lot of ash trees in there that, are gonna come down. There were a lot of dead and poor condition trees, so when you can look into the fine details, the picture gets a little more complicated. But to answer your question, yes, they are required to put more trees back in. Affordable housing, that's, they didn't come to the city saying we're looking to do more affordable housing. I haven't had any developer say that. In fact, I think the ones that I've seen that are being built are not affordable, that I would consider affordable. They're advertising luxury, high-end, that's what they're marketing, but we looked at the occupancy in our apartments, because we have some newer apartment buildings along Old Olive. And, the occupancies are high. So, I guess that can tell you that, there's still some demand for those types of buildings. But when I worked in Clayton, they tried doing set-asides for a residential apartment building in downtown Clayton. Clayton on the Park is the name of it. And, I think, 15 units or something, a small amount.
Right.
Where as a condition of the rezoning, they had to have, I think it was 80% area median income. They had to, set aside some of those. And they tried it for 4 or 5 years, and they said, nobody's coming here for these. Can we just remove that condition? And they were able to get it removed. So, but other cities and other regions in particular, outside of St. Louis, they seem to have some of these requirements. I know, like, if you go to the East Coast, New Jersey, where there's real affordable housing issues, it's a mandate that cities provide that. So we just don't have some of those pressures here. I think we do have pressures, but maybe not to that level. So we tried certain things, but we're gonna be looking at that for the Bear East side. I just don't have a plan to be able to know what's going to be proposed, but we have some objectives that we're trying to develop, and I think we're interested in the housing.
Similar good school districts in Creve Coeur.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing is we haven't seen a whole lot of school-age children in the apartment buildings, and I don't know if that's the case here in Olivet. Like with the Oliver, because when Olia Village came around, obviously the school district was interested in that project, Ladue Schools. And there was some surveying done of school-aged children in our newer apartment buildings. And there's a handful, just not many. Now, the townhomes, that we're gonna get, so that's gonna be the first phase that actually is going to be proposed in Olean, will be attached townhomes. And those we're thinking will have more school-aged kids in them because they're set up better that way. A lot of the apartments, the new apartment buildings, they're one bedrooms predominantly.
Right.
And they just don't lend themselves to having kids. There's some 2 bedrooms and maybe even a little bit of 3, but mostly what we've seen is 1 bedroom.
And the other thing was about, when you were saying about it being like a village in Oleo with the Main Street, and then you were also talking about older citizens wanting to move to someplace, well, there's walkability. So for example, in Olivet, when they just put in the Aldi's, now you see people walking to the grocery store in the neighborhood where they didn't have that option before.
Yeah, and I think that's what's exciting about some of these developments, like you said, the grocery store here in Olivet. If you provide the sidewalk connections, you're giving folks the option where, the option didn't exist before. I mean, Olivet's probably like Creve Coeur. These subdivisions were not developed with sidewalks at all. In fact, that was the opposite of what people were looking for when these neighborhoods were built in the 50s. They didn't want they wanted to get away from whatever was viewed as, not great back then, come out more of the country estate and larger lots, bigger, without the sidewalks and walkability. Well, now folks want that. And so, we struggle trying to put some of that back in because you still get some of these, well, I do want the trail. I just don't want it behind my property.
None of my.
But I feel like that's a little bit of noise that you've just got to push through. Because I think at the end of the day, it's what folks are looking for. They like the connectivity, so.
But if they're putting the grocery store in there too, is it going to be, how is that going to impact the Schnucks?
Well, there's a grocery store. So you can imagine you wouldn't have 2 grocery stores.
I think that's enough said.
There's a grocery store project.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming to visit with us.
Yeah,
You're welcome to the city of Olivet anytime, and we're glad to have you.
I appreciate the invite. It's been nice talking with everyone and nice meeting the mayor, and
Okay,
Carlos and I have known each other for a long time. And always liked working with Carlos, and so we reached out. I thought this was kind of a fun opportunity.
well, he's
Maybe we
pretty
can
decent.
reciprocate and have Carlos over and talk about it.
He's a pretty decent dude. I like him too. All right,
Thank you
folks,
again.
thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Development for your project.
Yeah, it's called Jack Matthews Development.
Jack Matthews.
Yeah. They're out of Illinois. They've done a lot of work. They do a lot of work in Edwardsville. But Jack Matthews, he's development, and his construction company is fund the construction. So they're the ones that are doing all the construction. But then they're gonna be selling some of these lots. And so the townhome portion, they're selling that to a home builder. So they're not going to be, they're selling that off.
They got any kind of MBE goals that they're trying to reach?
Yeah, there's some in there. I don't know them off the top of my head, but yeah, we have redevelopment agreements. In fact, if you go on our website, there's an Oleo Village webpage, and it has all the development agreements, and it would be in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, Mayor.
I'm not involved in it, but, it's a bumpy ride down all the boulevard. Because I go to Uber's, like that here, we're not going to walk in. I have an issue, but anyway, all my doctors are located on Dallas, so, we're RGS. So, working with go to us to get.
I mean, they're gonna be.
It's like
I think they're resurfacing. They should be starting.
I go. So I just.
It's an option.
This is 75-year-old. I would suggest the word say the area is, you know. I aged out of the house, it's a good story. Not two stories, one story, one elevation per house. There is one. And if you go out to Chesterfield, it's like you're actually, there are condos out there. It's moving to larger square footage. Someone will take care, I was in understand. I'm like.
They're not reflecting a lot of that stuff. That's just not.
It's like either that or go to lunch. That's not my. I'm not ready for this.
She found a magic villa, you know, but it wouldn't be. They talked all the things, like, you know, this happened to be about the same square footage. All the meetings is paid for.
It's like saying, are there things that people don't wanna do this, but in reality, we do, because I think that I'm not gonna be able to, either I have to put it somewhere like my yard, you know, where I've always cut it, garden, whatever.
So my mom just moved to the villa. She had to get her yard. She had to give up her car. And all of her, you know, that was her. The garden and the flowers and the shrubs and all that. But she gets to the point where she was asking me for help bottom. You know, maybe it's something you need to think, you know, she misses it. It's been tough because all that's maintained on the outside, which is great.
Right.
But she's limited in what she can do with it.
Right, no, I do understand, because I have a very extensive garden in Avalon, I'm the
It's a
vice
trail.
president of the Olive.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm very. Okay, anyway, thanks. I did wonder what was happening up there.
Yeah. Okay, nice meeting you.
Yeah, you were talking, we're talking about trees. There's, it's pretty cool to have a tree ordinance.
Yeah, we have a tree ordinance that is, kicks in when you replat subdivision, so that subdivision activity, we have one there. And then we have one for, individual residential, family homes, where they tear down like for new houses, they tear down and rebuild. Other than that, and then we have the, you know, for, yeah, no, those are the two.
You don't have anything about. Because one of the things. Yeah, we have to all these regulations. They just didn't know whether.
We have on property meetings, so we have like that or.
Yeah.
We might have up for that, but if you're existing homeowner, we don't have any, you can take that tree if you want. We do have street tree requirements, those are a little bit different.
Well,
They're